and welcome back to another episode on Born to Talk with Callanthea. So, this episode is going to be about my teaching experience, okay, and how it impacted me and my mental health, my well-being, and hopefully you'll kind of leave with a better understanding of the teaching profession, especially as a secondary school teacher in England. That's my specific experience, but from what I've heard, it's very similar, in primary school teaching, in other subjects, and also in other countries. Now, I'm doing this one today, and I know it might not seem like it directly is self-improvement. However, it is indirectly self-improvement because it is about well-being, okay, and recognizing the hard demands of our working life, and if there is anything that we can do to sort of be aware of that and help ourselves. So I'm going to kind of mention a bit about my sort of background, as well as some misconceptions with teaching. And then I'm going to share with you a story that will invite you to imagine that you're the teacher. It's a day in the life of a teacher, and this is what it is typically like every day. And it is absolutely realistic. It's based on my experiences as a secondary school English teacher. So that being said then, let's just make a start first of all. And I wanted to mention this statistic because this statistic is quite shocking. About a third of teachers in the UK leave the profession in the first 5 years. So they've done the training, they've done all that hard grafting, and before they even reach 5 years, they've left, a third of them. And I always remember hearing that statistic, even when I was a trainee, and I thought, oh, that won't be me. But I am that statistic, unfortunately. I just am. So there's also some kind of common misconceptions with teaching. People seem to think that teachers either just read PowerPoint slides or they work 9 till 3 and they get lots of holidays off, right? I think because in this country, in England specifically, we do get 13 weeks off in the year, which is loads in comparison to other full-time employees in different jobs. So I can understand why the public have a perception of it being easier in teaching because of those holidays. But you'll soon realise that those holidays are absolutely necessary and also not even enough really with what you have to deal with. And obviously it's not enough to keep people in the profession. Okay, so I will be touching upon the kind of broken system and how it is a catalyst really for more burnt out teachers. So just a little bit about my background then. So I started teaching. In fact, I did my trainee year. I started in 2019 and I had passed it during COVID, so during lockdown. And I've been teaching English for about 4 years in mainstream schools. So I've worked in 2 secondary schools in different areas. And what's really noticeable is that during those 4 years, obviously I had 4 birthdays, right? 1 every year. 2 of those birthdays were spent working, not just working, but working whilst Ofsted were inspecting the school. And that really pissed me off. Really pissed me off. The first time it happened, I was like, are you serious? It's my birthday tomorrow. Now I've got to change everything because I've been told that we've got to make sure everything looks squeaky clean for the English department. I've got to rush round last minute, day before my birthday, exhausted. And I really was unhappy with that. And then it happened again at another school. And I was like, what is it with the 9th of December? Why do Ofsted show up on the 9th of December? And not only that, it's, Christmas month, right? Where the kids are a little bit more crazy. You've probably heard of Ofsted, and how they inspect schools and, it does cause a lot of stress for teachers, especially because, management want to make sure they're getting it right and they delegate everything out to everyone below them. And it's a big team effort. But there's so much pressure put on that. And, there was even a teacher, I think she worked in England. If it wasn't England, I think it was Wales. I can't remember which school it was now, but which country. But there was basically a teacher in the UK a head teacher who had committed suicide. And there was talks about how Ofsted kind of stressed her out that much. She was really sort of upset with them coming in and inspecting. And some people believe that is what pushed her to commit suicide. And we don't know all the facts, of course, but it is a serious, serious topic. Okay, schools are overworked, and when you've got an outsourcing body come in and almost like threatening your school, they want to do what's right for the kids, and I get that, but almost threatening the school and its reputation, it just puts so much pressure on all the teachers who work there and all the people in management who work there as well. So, before I kind of go through this story that I've kind of created, just to kind of show you a day in the life of a teacher, I just want to mention, that I could say so many things on this episode, and I honestly don't think I would have time. It would be a good few hours, and I'm not even joking. But, we know that teachers are under a lot of stress, okay? They are overworked. And I'm just going to list a few things that all teachers will complain about and that crop up for them all the time, okay? So teachers often have a very full timetable. They have large classrooms, so they've got classrooms full of loads of kids there. You can't really focus on, individual needs as much because you've just got that many kids. Don't forget, you've got to manage the behaviour, you've got to mark all of those papers and books. And also, going to extracurricular activities, this is either compulsory or it's frowned upon if you don't do it. Safeguarding, admin tasks, parents' evenings, open evenings. Honestly, the list goes on and on. Okay, teachers are not just teaching, they are a whole other host of jobs within teaching. And this is why burnout is absolutely real in this profession. So, obviously, I mentioned that I'm going to kind of share this story, which I've written in second person. And it's not like a detailed story or anything like that, but it takes you through what it was like for me when I was working in those mainstream educational settings, when I was waking up to when I get home. And it is honestly so realistic. Like, I had days like this for the most part. Now, not everything that I've put in this is what happened every single day, but it pretty much did. And that is more than enough. When you do go to school, so many things can happen. There's all that sort of unpredictability, that you just can't have consistency when you're going to school because things can crop up essentially. Not to mention, you are literally dealing with over 200 kids every day. You've got your form, you've got all your classes, you've got all the other kids that you don't teach that you have to interact with, thinking about your break duties as well, where, you're having to try and interact or deal with behavioural problems. So there's a lot of interaction and it's very tiring, very overwhelming. I don't know what job you guys might be in if you're listening. Maybe you are in teaching, maybe you're not, but my partner, he probably talks to just a handful of people when he goes to work and he works in an office. Whereas as a teacher, you've literally got to try and talk to every single kid in your class, make sure you're interacting with them, walking around, checking all the work, dealing with a whole host of problems, as well as interacting with your colleagues and doing meetings after school, etc. So that being said, I'm going to make a start on this little story, and it's not written very well. I just kind of want to take you through it. And if you can do your best to imagine that when I'm saying you, it is literally your life and this is what it's like. Okay, let's make a start on this then. So your alarm goes off around 6 a.m, depending on your commute. But you were already wide awake all night because your brain wouldn't switch off from work. You get to work no later than 7:30 so you can finish planning lessons for the day. You were simply too tired yesterday, especially after the career and professional development meeting that you had to attend, which was lip service to staff wellbeing. You would have to chuckle about this, otherwise you'd cry. Anyway, you load your computer, which has been super slow this morning, almost as if it is conspiring against you and wants to see you fumble through a shit lesson with your worst class that day. It loads in the end. And you have to load your emails because there is usually a bombardment of very important messages and also not so important messages. But if you miss one, you'll likely be found out. So you skim through them as quick as you can. There's a few reminding you to chase up parent phone calls and some about general school statistics and safeguarding. You finish reading. Phew. Now what did you need to do? Oh yes, plan your 6 lessons before the kids arrive. PowerPoint slides are usually there, but need a thorough read through before teaching and need to be adapted for your specific classes. As you patter about on your keyboard, you realise you've not got all the printed resources you need for that day. And if you don't print them and make the kids glue them into their books, you will be exposed in a department book check meeting and be shamed in front of your colleagues. So you dash to the printer on your floor, only to find there's no ink. So quickly, you scramble up the stairs to the other printer, which has ink, but no paper. You decide to sprint to the last printer, where you find a member of the senior leadership team printing a shitload of documents off. You smile, say good morning, laugh about your frantic need to find a printer, even though inside your blood is boiling. In 5 minutes, the teenagers will be coming in the building and you're responsible for a form. You've not even checked the daily form slides you need to go through with them yet. That's going to have to be another wing it job. You decide printing resources off is going to have to take a back seat today, and that it's not the end of the world if the kids haven't glued them in, despite what your head of department will say. You get back to your room and load the slides and have the register open and ready, almost as if you've been so tranquil and patiently waiting for the kids to enter the building. You notice the all too familiar distant grumble that gets louder and louder. Suddenly, there's a herd of banshees terrorising the corridors. You hear lots of banging and shouting and laughing and screaming, and it's only just turned 8 a.m. You take a deep breath and stand at the door to greet your form with a bright, beaming smile. You know you could be an A-list actor if you wanted. You've learned to hide your emotions very well. The kids come bouncing in. Some are sweet, some are grumpy, and some are defiant. Some want the toilet, some don't have their tie on, and some ask for a new pen. But there were no more boxes in the supply room, so you say, sorry, I couldn't find any. You begin the register, and after saving it, you have to go back and amend it for all the latecomers. You scramble through the form slides, not knowing what the next one will be, and just hope the kids don't ask too many questions. Then you send them on their way to their first lesson. Your first 2 lessons go okay. The kids are calmer, sleepy, and you fumble through it without the paper resources. The bell goes and it's break. You're starving. You sit down, get your banana. Then you realise you need the toilet and I'd better go sooner, otherwise you'll have to hold it until lunch. You decide to multitask, eat and walk. It's more efficient that way. After the toilet, you remember it's Thursday and you have break duty. Shit. You start to dart down the stairs, but you realise you need your coat as it's raining, so you rush back to your room, get your coat and then head outside. By the time you get down, you've broken a sweat. You've also just beaten the member of staff with the clipboard who ticks off staff names to check that they actually are attending their duty. Some kids around you start grabbing each other's ties. You tell them to stop, and they do. You feel powerful. A moment later, a group of older boys who tower over you are swearing loudly, so you tell them to stop. They don't even acknowledge you and continue to swear. Now you feel powerless again. Damn it. Break time is over, and you go line up your form. Due to all the litter the kids drop, gulls fly above. A few silly boys freak out when they get close and try to waft them away, making other kids laugh. The head of year is trying to get everyone's attention and for all forms to be silent. Now you have to whip them into shape. One of them continues, so you give them a warning. That's not enough, so you move them to the front of the line, hoping they don't kick off because you'll have to remember to phone home later. You head inside and the corridors are chaos. The kids are always wild after break, and especially after a rainy or a windy day. You greet your 3rd class, but 3 of them refuse to sit in the new seating plan. You spend the first 15 minutes getting everyone in their seats and doing the register. A few kids have already had a warning. As the lesson continues, a few kids ask for the toilet. If they have a pass, they can go. If not, they do need to hold it if they can. The ones without passes argue aggressively to the point you have no choice but to get them removed. You know adhering to the strict behaviour policy is important, and you need to be consistent at all times. After all the aggro has simmered down, it's almost the end of the lesson and you have your next class. Your belly rumbles and you start to feel weak and lightheaded. You've not eaten or drank enough, but there's only one more lesson until dinner, even if it is your worst behaved class. You take another deep breath and hope and pray that 2 boys in particular aren't in school that day. But they are, so you welcome them with a big smile and they begin to get argumentative about why you gave them a detention yesterday, even though they continued to disrupt learning and told you to fuck off. You try to calm them by saying today is a blank slate. It's not helping. So you tell them if they have a good lesson, then by Friday you'll make a positive phone call home. They acquiesce and drag themselves into the classroom. Now you have more to do on Friday, and you need to remember to do it because these kids will hold it against you if you don't. It's finally dinner. You have half an hour, so you scoff your sandwich, then fill up your water bottle and go to the toilet again. You want to fall asleep, but decide to be positive by saying to yourself, only 2 more lessons to go, we've got this. A kid from your farm comes knocking at your door, looking really sad. You let them in and have a chat. You realise you need to report safeguarding, so you load up the system and type in what the kid has told you. You reassure them and send them on their way. The last 2 lessons are often the worst, as the kids are even more crazy after dinner. Luckily, you can manage the next class really well and are actually happy to see them. When the lesson finishes, you stand at the door waiting for your last class of the day. They are a decent class, but when it's the last lesson, they are either hyper or moan constantly. You know you've got your work cut out. You've just got the kids settled and your room phone rings, wanting to check the attendance of a kid in your class. You confirm they're there and try hard to re-engage the kids again. A few kids are truanting in the corridors and decide to throw pens into your classroom and then run away. Your class are definitely not in the mood to learn now, but some of them help you pick up the pens. You're wondering whether you should just play a game of hangman instead when a senior member of staff comes into your room to observe a part of your lesson. They didn't tell you that they were coming and you feel flustered and hard done by. It's the last lesson of the day. Are you serious? When the last lesson finishes, you breathe a sigh of relief. Only 1 more day to go before the weekend. You desperately can't wait to sleep. And before you know it, the summer holidays will be around and you've already started counting down the days. But you can't think about the weekend yet because you have your weekly department meeting after school. So you head to the room and the department lead tells everyone there are some schemes of work to create which will be taught the next academic year. A few brave members of the team mention that the schemes we have are good and it makes it easy for us to get used to doing the same lessons. It's better for our workload. But this is rebutted because this task has been delegated from above. You are told there won't be many changes next year, so you can relax once this is done. By the time you get home, it's 5 p.m, and you want to tell your partner how annoying it is you have to do more work on top of more work. But you're too tired, so you eat your food, avoid eye contact, then fall asleep on the sofa. You get woken up because it's now 8 p.m, and you realise you're wasting your precious evening. You have a second wind. This evening is yours. You decide to have a good conversation, but that turns into work talk. Now you're super wired and definitely won't sleep much tonight. But you start to feel smug because tomorrow it's Friday, which means it'll be the weekend. And, you're so lucky to have weekends off. Even if you do plan and mark during them, at least you get to do it at home. Whilst laying in bed, you think about asking to go part-time. You know that you'll still do work during your day off, but it should help take the edge off. But you aren't pregnant, and you know that they're not going to let you work part-time unless you have a family reason. So you turn your thoughts to 10 years' time. Teaching has to get better then, surely. You look at your clock and it's 3 a.m. This is normal, and you start to think you're superhuman because sleep is for the weak, and you're proud of your resilience. Okay, that's the end of my story of a day in the life of my experience in teaching. I hope that's given you a bit more of an understanding of what it's like, and bearing in mind that this is a typical day. At least it was a typical day for me, and it will be for most teachers, okay, especially in England. So even though it's a typical day, okay, imagine doing that for the rest of the academic year. You need that time off. And there was plenty of times when I did have time off because it was the half term, and I spent the whole half term being ill, and I had to recover. Just because my body was holding on, trying to make it through, the few weeks that was really difficult. And then eventually it kind of crashed. So this is really normal for teachers, unfortunately. And when it does come to the 6-week holiday, that is the only holiday that genuinely feels like a break, because the first week or two, you're still kind of sleeping more, you're trying to rest more, you're trying to switch off from work. And then you have a nice few weeks in between where you are actually switched off from work. And then you have like a week or two before where you're kind of dreading going back to work, like a mixture of dread and excitement for the new year. But honestly, it was just so difficult. And that's obviously my experience, but I do think that this is just really the tip of the iceberg with teaching. And essentially, a system is messed up. We're not really built to withstand the sheer volume and demand that comes with teaching, especially full time in a mainstream setting. And I know that other jobs are obviously difficult as well, like being a doctor, being a nurse. Okay, there's probably loads of professions where you have to work crazy, crazy hours. But just because we can be resilient doesn't mean to say that we have to be that resilient. I just think that that is creating a toxic resilience culture and a hustle culture. But honestly, I do think that it's going to catch up with everyone at some point. Um, and essentially, I kind of learnt when I moved to my to the second school. Um, I realised that the system was still the same, even though the school was a bit different, and there were some things that were better, some things that weren't as good as the previous school. But I learned that the system is still the same, and I just had this like strong feeling within that made me feel so sad. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. Like, I literally cannot be in this environment anymore. And I'm really glad that I listened to it, because even when I left, I still suffered from burnout. Like, I had really bad stomach problems, kept getting ill all the time. And, it got to the point where my body would go into some kind of like nervousness, even when I'm doing something I want to do or going to see friends. And it's something that is really fun. But my body would like almost like perceive it as something dangerous and hard work. So I would still have problems and feel quite ill on those days. Um, and even now, like I said, I'm still quite ill. I'm still trying to recover. I just keep getting ill. Um, and I do think that this year is going to be so much better for me, because there's not going to be any major change, especially in my job. So I feel like I can actually settle into it and just look after my well-being. But this is why I just really kind of wanted to do this episode today. And I'm aware that I've kind of talked quite a lot about this, but like I said, I feel like I could talk so much more about teaching. And if you are a teacher and you listen to this, I'm sure you completely understand it and get it. There's probably a whole other range of things I've left out and missed out, because there's just that much stuff that literally happens in any school day. From fire alarms going off to like it's just crazy. You're constantly on your feet and having to make decisions all the time, and you do get decision fatigue. So definitely not an easy job to do. That doesn't mean to say that teaching, like purely just teaching, is bad. Teaching is really, really good, and I'm lucky I get to teach and work from home now. Um, Sometimes I do come across safeguarding behaviour things, but it's hardly any. And if there are behaviour issues, it's a lot easier to deal with, and I can just kick them out of the lesson if I want, because it's all online. Um, so it's just so much more manageable, so much easier. I'm just more enjoyable. But that's not that classroom teaching can't be enjoyable. It absolutely can be. And I've had some amazing pupils and amazing classes. But unfortunately, it's just too much. The sheer amount of work you've got to do. Um, it's just insane. So I'm glad that I did leave mainstream education. And honestly, I just can't see me ever going back to being in that environment. Unless I was kind of like, if I had to do supply, um or if the system completely changed, and we had smaller class sizes and a little bit more free time in his timetable, so we can actually do all the work. But until the system changes, there's no way that I can go back as a full time teacher, which is, a massive shame, because I thought it was like a career for me. And some teachers make it work somehow, or they look like they're making it work. But honestly, I do think that even those people that seem to be so happy and smiley and full of energy, eventually it will catch up on them. So, really important topic. And if you are kind of suffering from burnout, I really do hope that you can be aware of what it is that's causing you that. And if it is your job, consider, is there anything you can do to kind of take a step back? Can you go part time? Can you speak to your manager about what's going on? or do you have to leave and find another job? Because it is really important that we do take our well-being and into our hands and take it really seriously. And like I mentioned earlier, in the little story that I read out, in CPD meetings, they would sometimes talk about pointless shit or they talk about well-being. And it's like every teacher's just sitting there thinking, if you really care about my well-being, you'll let me go home early. You'll let me go home early and, get more sleep. Honestly. And also just kind of want to mention as well that when it comes to burnout, we all will respond in different ways. We are all quite unique in that sense. Some of us will get, really fatigued. Some of us might get more anxious. Some of us might get really bad stomach problems, a whole host of things. But I was listening to this podcast the other day and I can't remember what this doctor's called, but basically she's like an expert in stress. And she was saying that burnout doesn't just have to be those symptoms. Burnout can be when you are so addicted to checking, say, your emails, you're constantly thinking about work, you're being really productive, you're getting on with it constantly, constantly, constantly. She says that that is actually a sign of burnout because you're not able to switch off your brain from work. So even if you think you're enjoying it and you're crushing it, at the end of the day, you are still burning yourself out and it will catch up on you. So I found that really interesting. And I'm sure many of us can relate to just constantly checking his emails, making sure we're on top of things, but you never really are on top of things. And it just keeps you hooked, right? You're just like, oh, I can't let more of these things slide. I've got to be really on top of all this stuff. So I'm going to leave it there, but I just hope that you've taken something from this. This is literally what it's like to be a teacher, at least from my experience. And I do wish you all well, whatever job you are in. I hope it's good for you. Look after yourself. And remember, stay true to you. And hopefully, I'll see you soon.